and welcome to episode 329 of The Weekly, brought to you by Pocketnow and XD developers on this day, Friday, the 26th of October, 2018. From Xiaomi's busy week to Google's mishandling of sexual misconduct claims, it's a wide world in mobile tech out there, so we've got to talk about all of it. I'm Jules Wong, your host this week. Joshua is in China covering Xiaomi, but we will hear from him later on in the show, talking about another topic that we're actually looking forward to. Joining us for this segment, though, are two of our colleagues from XDA. TK Bay should be a familiar presence here. Welcome to you, sir.
Hey, thank you guys. Happy to be back, actually, and nice to see you again, Jules. It's been some time.
To finally have you back on. This has been a long time coming. And here with us for the first time is Daniel Marchena. Hello to you.
Hello, everyone. Glad to be here.
Hey, man.
Hey, glad to have you on. So there has been a lot of stuff that's happened this week that isn't a mobile phone launch. We've had a very congested kind of 3 weeks before with Google and Microsoft and LG and just a whole bunch of people. But
and Huawei too, you know.
And Huawei.
Yeah.
And Razer.
And
yeah. And to an extent, we'll be able to talk more about that with Nicole Scott in terms of what Xiaomi has done this week. So stay tuned for that. And in the meantime, I hope that our listeners and viewers can forgive some of the construction that's been going on upstairs, huh? Hey guys, you think that you got that chair fixed up? Okay, great, thanks. In any case, do bear with that in mind, and apologies for that. We'll go on as usual. I do want to start with one of the elephants in the room this week, and it was something that I kind of had to take a few seconds to think about as I was writing the story for this, and that was the New York Times report on not just Andy Rubin, one of the co-creators of Android, but just a whole bunch of executives at Google who were quietly paid off, and they were accused of sexual misconduct, of just not following procedures over there, and just it leaves a bad taste in your mouth. And in particular with Andy Rubin, it's not as if it's just he's just one of the father figures of Android, and that's why we're talking about it. It's also the fact that he was paid the most and was permitted to leave his influence, have his reign at Google from the time that Android got acquired in 2005 all the way to when he departed the company in 2013. And even after that, Google had supported him in creating his venture capital firm, Playground Global, as well as his company Essential. For me, this was one of those things where, you hear about something that an artist did that is horrible and reprehensible, and somehow you have to, deal with something like the debate of, can you separate the artist from the art? Can you separate the work from the person that did it? And I want to know what you think, what your first blush is, and I'm going to start with Daniel on this one.
Yeah, I share a lot of your sentiments. I feel the way that you do that, it's hard to separate the art from the artist. A lot of us see him as the father of Android. But, there were just a lot of bad decisions made at Google. And I think that's coming to light. It's good that it's coming to light, especially with the Me Too movement and everything else that's going on right now. But you can't look at him the same way anymore, unfortunately. And that's difficult to do, for me personally, at least.
Why so? I guess, I mean, it's almost obvious, but talk it out.
I think for me, part of the issues that I have is this was all right, to him, to the other individuals at Google who made these decisions to keep this quiet, to just kind of push under the rug and move him out. I think it shows to the kind of character individual that he is. He did come out with his statement. He's claiming that none of this is true. That this is all just smearing in advance of his custody battle going with his ex-wife or future ex-wife. So there's definitely some question and doubt thrown in there, but Google said that it's been confirmed and they viewed the allegations against him as credible. So he not only made terrible decisions, but he continued to make terrible decisions going forward.
And there was all this background reporting, and the people that either anonymously or um, publicly gave their names out and said that this happened. So it's multiple people saying what they say against what he says at this point. And that's something that it's going to be challenging for his case here. I want to get to TK here on this one. Just what are your first takes on this?
So the story kind of just, to me, it was kind of, I got caught out of nowhere. Suddenly somebody you've been, I mean, for in many ways, he's done a lot of good things for the community. I think Essential as a company was a good company. Sad to say where it's going now, but the level of, I guess, how deep this thing went, that's really the shock value for me. It wasn't just the fact that, because I'm going to say I'm not desensitized to the cases. There's a lot of things going on, and a lot of big names are basically being roped in things like this. But, just to see, and his response is essentially very, I'm really shocked that they shared my information, not necessarily kind of validating it. It's just the moment he segues into that, sharing specifics, it makes his statement feel less credible. So it's hard for me to believe him when he makes a statement that at the same time it says, I didn't do it. By the way, I'm surprised they shared my information. The reality is it's hard. It's hard. And like Dan said, you can't see him again in the same light. And this definitely has a lot of impact on his career now, because as his name now is associated with this, it's hard to work with him.
Some of the behaviors that he has been claimed to possess from coworkers, he said they have said that he has called some employees stupid or incompetent, and that when he was at the company for a time, he kept certain pornography on his work computer, and all that was given to him in return was a docking in his bonus for that year.
Yeah, and had it been any low-level person at that company, that would have been an immediate, here's your box, here's your pink slip, out the door.
Yeah. And Google has been very permissive of relationships in whatever form they take, even within the company itself, if it's between certain indirect subordinates with their not even people who they've reported to. And but the way that this has been talked about, it seems like, even though he has participated in consensual relationships with these people, it's that he didn't disclose them properly, and that's what kind of pushed him into the wrong with Google at the very least. But again, all in the face of this, we've seen him gather up annual compensations of at least $20 million past 2011. And then, we see stock bonuses. We see a sweetheart loan for a Japanese beach estate. And he was given a severance package that was very, very generous. In fact, probably, I believe, the highest, or one of the highest that has been given out. And this was determined by Larry Page, one of the co-founders of Google. And if it wasn't clear enough when Larry Page learned of any misconduct that Rubin took part in, it should have been made apparent when he, and this is the New York Times is reporting, when he determined the severance pay for Rubin. Like, there's...
It like I said, it's not a good position to be in, not only to recognize that there's an issue, but the way it was dealt with, it was almost like it was self-serving to a certain point, which should not have been that way. And I think my hope is essentially that this actually does shed some light and changes some of their policies so that they don't get into that position again, and they can hopefully find a way to even. I don't know how you come back from that. It's a tough position to be in.
It is.
From the
It
company,
is.
from both their sides, not just him. He's not in there anymore, but he did get paid, and they facilitated all the other things that we saw from him after, even on his way out, like you said. So to me, it's a little bit hard and a sad day for most Android users. I mean, because like I said, he holds a very high position for us, and that's one of the main key points about it is it's hard when you see somebody you admire do things like that.
I do. I mean, I want to give this the weight it deserves, but I don't want to focus too much on it because it's kind of somewhat, it's not really what we want to be able to talk about here in
No,
terms
no, I
of,
understand.
focusing on tech hardware. But just to wrap things up, I mean, where do you how much of an impact does this have on Android's reputation, or like at least the leadership? Like, what will that have an effect towards? Because we haven't seen Google speak about this. In fact, the top post on their keyword blog is Android celebrating its 10th anniversary.
Anniversary.
So,
Yep.
yeah, I'm wondering what Daniel thinks.
I think that this is a bigger issue for Google, than it might be for Android. Unfortunately, we're seeing that, especially in the Me Too movement, that it's not having a huge effect on individuals themselves, but establishments are having issues. And, this isn't a one-off thing for Google. There have been a few other individuals who have had sweetheart deals, have continued their roles at Google after these kinds of allegations of misconduct. So I definitely think that this is going to affect Google more than it's going to affect Android. I think people who maybe have been with Android since the very beginning and know Rubin's involvement with it from the beginning, they might be a little bit affected. But I don't really think that it's much more than a speed bump right now for Android as a whole. But Google, I definitely think that this is a warning sign of maybe something worse that's coming up.
Yeah,
TK, do
definitely.
you think the dissociation of Android and Google when, Samsung, its Galaxy brand,
I was about to say the exact
Moto,
same thing. Yeah,
Droid, yeah, I
the
mean, it's just,
fragmentation of Google, the fragmentation of Android amongst all the different devices, carriers, OEMs, so on.
it's kind of an ironic saving grace of some
Yeah,
sort.
it's at the end, for the most part, people will refer to it. Maybe they may call out to Google, but at the end of the day, Android is in so many different shapes and flavors and OEMs and devices and access. So I think in the whole, I don't see this as an issue for Android as an operating system. For anybody that has an Android phone is not going to think about Andy. Again, tech nerds or the tech community knows and understands who Andy is, and the average user may or may not even be affected by it. They're only going to think about it as a Google effect. So, it'll take time. And like I said, it needs to be handled the right way and truthfully. And they need to have a good plan so people can basically accept it and move on. It's a
Well,
tough one. Yeah,
it
it is.
is. And we
But
shall move on in the
yeah, yeah, I
meantime
was
to
good.
another topic.
Yeah, 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 yeah.
Yeah, I mean, it's just, it's something, but I felt like something had to be said about that, so I'm glad we did. Let's talk about Aptoide and third-party app stores for
Of course.
Android in the meantime, because we just learned
Well, we have
this
we
week
have one
of
too. Just remember.
the
So yeah,
XDA.
the XDA App Store. Yeah.
Download it today. We have just learned this week of a ruling in Portuguese courts that supports Aptoide, and this claim that the Google Play Protect security feature that's associated with the Play Store and whatnot, has been detecting Aptoide as a risk to the user's devices,
Yeah.
and in some cases has uninstalled the app or has made it at the very least, has made it very, very hard to download apps from Aptoide for the sake it is alleged of harming competition. And Aptoide has said that it has affected at least 2.2 million daily active users, which it has lost. And we're going to have to see what happens at this point to Google, which is already facing a whole bunch of
In the EU.
European
Yep.
Commission
Exactly.
fines. So I want to know what your take is, TK.
I mean, so I you have to look at it from both sides, right? So from one end, you have to look at it from the App Store, right, or the Play Store versus Aptoide. There are other Apple or other stores that you can get applications from. So there's the XDA, the other apps. But for the most part, Google has never gone directly after other app stores. Essentially, it hasn't tried to infringe on them being not only side-loaded, because you're downloading them directly, you're not downloading them direct from the Google Play Store. But I think it has to tie into the whole Google Play Protect, right? It's a service that they're trying to say that this protects your device, gives you a security. So from Google's end, they're saying, look, you're bringing in a store that's going to be able to download applications that are not verified by us, so we can't guarantee them. And I think that's where it should stop. It should not go into the point of saying, look, we're going to remove it for you. And not only that, we're going to make it very hard for you to use. So I like the ruling. I like the fact that it's allowing third-party application stores to reside and actually function as a normal thing to update applications, push notifications, and stuff like that. And I hope that this does not, give Google the permission to say, okay, well, we're not going to be able to protect your device if you can download things from third-party application stores, and that's not true. You need to know what you're downloading. That's number one. You are the number one antivirus program or method is the user, because you're the one who opens the door. You can put as many locks on the door, but if you open that door, all of those locks are pointless. So I'm happy with the ruling. I think it's something that definitely will help the community and could definitely help us down the road as well. Because, as I said, XDA Store as well has other applications that are intended for power users that sometimes do things even more than a standard app can. That's
And Daniel, good. How have you been navigating all of this news lately with Google's bundling, or whether it should bundle certain services of its own?
Personally, I agree with TK's stance on it. I think this ruling is good for Android as a whole. Under the auspice of the Play Protect, why hasn't Amazon been removed from certain? You can sideload the Amazon App Store.
Mm-hmm.
Like we said at XDA, we have an app store that you can sideload for mods and things like that on your phone. Why haven't we been stopped? Or, I know we've had problems in the Play Store, but why haven't we been stopped from sideloading and stuff? So it almost seems to me like this was a directed attack against them to remove them, because this is a very big application, and Google's no doubt losing money and, share because of the way that this was running. And I haven't seen anything as far as, malware being spread. I haven't seen anything as far as wares or, hacked paid applications being spread through this app store. Again, I haven't used it myself, and nothing I've seen has mentioned that. So it's kind of weird that Google was targeting them. As far as the other EU rulings, I think it's going to take some time to really see where it's going to come down. In the EU, Google's now going to be charging for application bundles based on the display density size.
Yep.
I think that's a really dangerous road to go down. I think it's going to encourage smaller OEMs to split off and kind of do their own deal. So time will only tell as far as that goes. But as far as this is, I think this is a good ruling to help keep Android open and not wall it off to just, what Google wants you to have. But, safety, like TK said, you've got to know what you're downloading. You got to know what you're putting on your device.
Yeah, well, especially to that EU ruling with and how Google is reacting to that in terms of licensing out these Google apps to Android OEMs targeting the European market. I'm wondering what the effects will be, because will it impact how these OEMs bring over certain devices into those markets, or if anything will change at all, if how money is made will continue to be made that way. I was wondering if either of you have any thoughts on that.
So that one, I'll let you go first, Dan, because mine's mine can get longer. Yeah.
I was actually talking with some people about this pretty in depth, and I might have somewhat of a doom and gloom perspective on this. But when you're considering devices that only cost $100 or $200, another $10, $15, $20 in pure loss for these OEMs, unless they're going to increase their profits or increase their prices, that's a big hit. We already know they're not making a whole lot of money on these low-scale devices. So they're either going to stop making these low-scale devices, or what I think is they're going to start moving away from Google. They're going to start offering third-party app stores. Huawei has them, Samsung has them, Xiaomi has them.
Yep.
They have their own app stores. And a lot of the Google services can be accessed through PWAs. I mean, you go to the Gmail website on your phone, it's not a whole lot different than the Gmail application on your phone. So the Google Maps website on the phone is very similar to the application. So what is Google really offering by making them pay this, especially for those low end devices? Again, it could be just doom and gloom, but I think it's a scary look to what could possibly be coming, especially on that low end.
Well, you mentioned progressive web apps, and I'm wondering whether or not KaiOS might have any sort of wedge into that, which Google is backing, by the way. So perhaps that might be an up and coming maybe factor on that. And we'll wrap things up here with TK.
Yeah, no, I mean, Dan kind of summed it up pretty nicely. I think the fact is there's a big market in Europe with mid-rangers and low-end devices that are intended to be basically cost-effective. It's hard to bring that into an ecosystem that's already there. It's going to damage it. And I think I think for the most part, this may be a leveraging point. This may be just, hey, this is how it's going to impact you if you're going to start going down that route with us. And I think I'm hoping it's just a scare tactic. It may be just a negotiation move, that it does not impact low-end devices. But at the end of the day, shameless plug, if it does happen, you got to keep in mind that there are other stores, there are other application stores that could basically see this as a very big, very easy opportunity to jump in. Manufacturers can release Android without an actual Google Play services installed. We've seen it in the past. You can sideload things on your own. And all it's really doing is just changing the interaction, but we'll have other options and other things that we can do, and people will find a way. That's the beauty of Android. There's always a way.
Well, there's some beauty in that, I would guess. And another thing that we can find beauty in, perhaps, is the Galaxy A8s. Now, in China, this week, we just found out about the Galaxy A9s and Galaxy A6s, and, they're decent Galaxy A mid-range to premium level kind of things. I think MediaTek has been really pushing this notion of new premium, or more generic term of premium B. But in terms of the A8s, which has been teased, we're looking at bezel, like what? Aren't there any bezels here? There's just curved glass, a curved display, and there's practically nothing there. Not even room for the selfie camera. So what's going on here? Well, word is that there's going to be that vaunted pie in the sky innovation that we've been looking forward to for a long time, and that is the hole in the display to allow room for the camera. Or at least, well, I guess my pie in the sky thought would have been to have the camera be able to shoot through the deactivated activated diodes that around the field of view. That would have been my thought. But are you looking forward to this? Is this something that will make it out of China? Let's start with Daniel on this one.
Yeah, I'm actually pretty excited about this. To me, this came out of nowhere. I wasn't expecting to see it. But one thing to keep in mind, TK, you might remember it. Same thing with you, Jules. Back in, what was it, 2015? I think it was. Samsung had the Galaxy A5, and that was the very first full metal body Samsung phone. It was actually the predecessor to the body design that we actually saw in the Note 4. So this is something that Samsung has done before. They've tested, new designs on their A series phones, and I think this is something that this might be them working out the kinks and figuring out how it's going to work for the Galaxy S10. I think it's really cool. There's really no telling whether this is going to be distracting or not. I definitely think if they do this, the camera has to be in the center. But if we know on Android Pie, they have that corner cutout as part of the developer settings. So maybe they know that something's coming in the corner of displays. It could be distracting, but it's much better than notches, especially when you figure notches like the size of the one on the Pixel 3. So, but I think the Xiaomi Mi Mix 3 gives us an alternative to that. If you don't want a hole cut out in your display, you've got a beautiful full
Oh boy.
There's that notch. A full display without having
Thanks,
to have any
TK.
holes cut out of it.
Yeah, sorry, I had to. He called it out. I had to point it out.
Well, I mean, you got anything to point out about the A8S?
I think it's so that it's a race to a TV. I think it's like we all want to have the bezel list, the nicest design. I think Dan's right. It's really going to be an interesting design if they do go with it. The camera needs to be centered. I would love to actually see something similar to the way you would describe it, which is the ability to have it behind the display. And just as you want to use your selfie camera, it deactivates the pixels in front of it, and suddenly we can see through, and it can compensate for that. Because we're starting to see some tech behind the display with the fingerprint sensor, so that could be the route coming down the road. But I'm more interested still in the fact of where is the rest of the earpiece? Are we talking bone conduction here? When everything is already up there, yeah, it's or are we? Because nobody mentioned any kind of mechanical pings popping up with an earpiece. It's nice. I think it's a good design. Will it come out of China? It's hard. The A series is generally have not done very good outside, or at least in the US, because we don't usually get them here. But I think as a device, I think it's a great concept. The S10 needs to have a design change. We can no longer do incrementals anymore. 2018 was the incremental. 2019 needs to be the new design. So that will be nice if they're able to do that and not do a notch. Although,
I mean, it would.
But regarding the speaker that you're talking about, the Mi Mix and the Essential phone have those razor thin speakers along the border of the phone, so they might not have to do bone conduction. I really hope they don't do any kind of bone conduction going forward with this.
It was hard to see from those images. Speakers. Yeah, I was. Yeah. I'm interested to see in those, and definitely I want to see some of the new gestures we've seen in Pi betas on the Samsung's UI interface. I think that would be really nice because then that's all you need. You need really good gestures, and this thing is just going to be heaven. Yep. It'll be nice. Massive display and minimal intrusion with the sensors in the front.
I'm wondering how graphical UI might be affected if it's just going to be that constant displacement of those few diodes not being there physically. If it's just going to be, okay, well, do we change the notification bar or status bar entirely? Or just, form it into a little lozenge in and of itself, which I think we already have one too many lozenges at the bottom of the display, at least for pixels.
Well, kind of like the Mi Mix designs, right? I mean, back in the day, Mi Mix used to be on the bottom right chin. I think it's interesting. I mean, we've seen a couple of even Xiaomi this week, as you guys have seen, the slider option coming out on their device to try to keep the cameras and the sensors behind there hidden in front of the display. So we're seeing more options, definitely. I'm hoping something sticks, and this looks promising, definitely.
We are OnePlus 6T minus 3 days away.
Oh, yes.
I like to be able to fit that in because that's just it's just stupid, but I know. Yeah, but you can't do it on the regular one. It's only on the T series, right? You can't. Yeah, exactly. So I think there is some good news to be shared here, and that is word that perhaps Verizon will be able to not sell it, but at least accept it onto its network without having to hassle it too much. So finally, something that's allowed on what's traditionally been a CDMA network. Perhaps it's just going to be an LTE-only phone. Verizon has been doing more of those recently, even with its flip phones too. So it'll be interesting to see. Thoughts, TK, on this perhaps major development for OnePlus?
So that was a big thing that for years people have been wanting to do with OnePlus devices, because you're getting the ability of having a flexibility of a Pixel device or a Nexus device, but at a much lower price point. And a lot of people wanted to do it. I think it's a win. I think OnePlus's strategy this year, from having just basically the things will get announced on Monday, but basically the things coming down on Monday, if this is one of them, and it's true, obviously, that we're going to be able to use it, I think it's amazing. I think Razer's on the same track. They just finally got their certification yesterday. We're seeing more GSM carriers now that LTE bands can be added, and then they're basically using SIM cards, and that's what makes it very flexible. You no longer have to call Verizon and switch between devices, especially if you're using the new chips. So I think it's a very nice thing. I think OnePlus is poised to be. They're going to be very big. in 2019, and I think this is this is going to play a big part for them.
Yeah, you mentioned the Razer phone too on that. Yeah, I forgot about that. Thanks for reminding me.
Well, that one just
So,
got it last night. They certified it. It passed yesterday.
yeah. Which, I mean, totally interesting. And given the recent controversies about Verizon having even talked about potentially SIM locking its phones again, it's like, okay,
Yeah.
what do we want to do here? How do we really feel about Verizon? I'm wondering if you have any thoughts towards just that network uh, adversarial relationship, Daniel.
Yeah, so like TK said, I think this is fantastic for OnePlus, and it's fantastic for enthusiasts in general that we're going to start getting new devices on Verizon's network.
Mm-hmm.
Regarding the CDMA capabilities of the network, they're actually phasing that out, which is why we're seeing LTE only devices come on. I think the HTC U11 was one of the first devices Verizon sold that was non-CDMA.
Mm-hmm.
And I think this is just the beginning of that deluge of phones. It's important to remember that the phones still do have to be authorized by Verizon. They have to be VoLTE certified because that is where their emergency calling has to go through voice over LTE. And I think this is good for the industry as a whole now that you'll be able to go between carriers with the same phone, and not be, buy a Verizon version of a phone and then buy a T-Mobile version of a phone or whatever. And for people who have been waiting for a OnePlus device, the OnePlus 6 is a fantastic phone. It has its flaws,
Yep.
but then again, it's, it's way cheaper than every single other phone on the market. So I think this is a very promising thing, and I think if OnePlus can leverage this properly and can really advertise the heck out of this, which they will absolutely do, I think they can open up to a whole new audience that doesn't want to spend $1,000 on a Pixel, but still wants the latest and greatest.
Well, the one thing that keeps us tied to our carriers as it is right now is not contracts, but the equipment installment plans where you pay 24 months for a device and you have to stay on the network. Otherwise, that lump sum becomes due immediately. So, perhaps we still need an unlocked market for that. And, to some of the company's credits here, we do see them offering more financing these days, but they're more risk averse in terms of this kind of market, I would say. So, interesting developments going on there. Let's move on finally to this little fun story, I guess. It's not fun for Ksenia Sobchak, and I apologize if my Russian is lacking here, but she was, at the very least, a Samsung brand ambassador. And when you're a brand ambassador, then the thing that you have to do is be an ambassador, an advocate, show off for the brand that you're representing.
Yep.
You have to represent the brand. And it appears that in an appearance on a talk show, the reality TV star and politician was trying to hide the fact that she was using an iPhone instead of supposedly what she was contracted to use, probably a Galaxy phone. Yep. And people were kind of, they called her out on that. We see a couple of shots of the TV program in question on the story here, which you can access at pocketnow.com/podcast. And it's not a good look. She is being sued for breach of contract. And $1.6 million the equivalent. Not something to sneeze at here. So
no.
Quick takes on this one, TK.
It's funny because obviously this is not the first time we've seen things like that, right? I mean, the moment that I saw this article, I was like, I'm having a flashback of MKBHD doing the screen grab of said company's name and said phone being used to post from. But it is a job, right? I mean, especially influencers and people that are in the public eye are performing a service of sorts. When you make an agreement, you really should make a good point of using or honoring the agreement, or at least make it so that you have the ability of using other devices. Is it realistic though that they're going after saying, because it could have been obviously, maybe the phone was broken, maybe something happened. There's a lot of things why people switch phones, but is it really justified? I think it's just Samsung's trying to make sure that they're putting their weight behind this one. Uh, it's comical in the sense of what's going in, but it's very serious in the amount of numbers that they're talking. Obviously, this is very, very serious. I'm not trying to belittle it, but it's a thing. If you're contracted to do something, you should have carried that phone with you, and you can carry two phones. It's not bad to carry two, sometimes three. Dan, help me out, bro.
Oh boy.
A lot of phones. It's not bad.
The visual joke has been lost on our podcast listeners.
Yeah, and you could see right there, it's not uncommon. So it's sad to see, but hopefully people will learn from this, and we won't hear any more about these things.
I'm sorry, listeners. We're piling on. We have nothing for you.
No.
Daniel. Yeah. Daniel, I mean, TK, I think has a great point in terms of we don't know every single detail about this issue, and that there might be mitigating factors for the star in question here. But how difficult is it to walk the line, especially when we don't have tangible assessment of how well these influencers do for the companies that they are employed by?
Yeah, I'd like $1.6 million for using somebody's phone.
Sign me up, bro. Sign me up. I'll be on that list right now. But I'll have to split that 1.6 between like 3 to 4 companies because I can't carry one.
Seriously. And honestly, this could be something as simple as, iMessage is hard to get out of. And a lot of people are hooked on it. And, I don't know the nature of her agreement. It's definitely difficult for us to speculate to that. So she might have been using it to keep in contact with her family or her producer or something like that. And there might have been a viable reason for her to using that. But, when she had that contract, she's hiding it with a piece of paper. So either she was hiding it from the screen or she was hiding it because she didn't want them to see she was on her iPhone. When you're in public, you've got to be using the device that you've been contracted to use. You shouldn't be going and using other things. But like you said before, this is a difficult thing to speculate on. We don't have all the details. But it's happened so many times before that it's comical to see. But it's unfortunate in her situation that she could stand to lose a lot of money.
That's true.
Yeah. Well, I mean, that's something in the new media world that we live in that kind of it's one of those thorns in the rose, you could say. Gentlemen, I would like to thank you for being part of the panel here for this first part of the show. Been a very, very good pleasure having you on, especially you, Daniel, for your first time.
Congratulations.
Thank you.
Yeah, and thank you, TK, as well. We'll be getting into some talk about Xiaomi in just a second with Nicole Scott of Mobile Geeks, right after you hear these messages. The Pocketnow Weekly is brought to you by the National Security Agency. Almost every day we hear something on the news about a cyber attack. Sometimes it's just a bunch of pranksters, but more often it's a foreign country with vast cyber resources, trying to hack into our power grid, our banking systems, or our military's information networks. The National Security Agency plays a big part in protecting our country from cyber attacks, and you can help. The NSA is hiring technical professionals to serve on the front lines of information security. If you work in computer science, networking, programming, or electrical engineering, you can help keep our country safe. Design new hardware systems and networks. Write faster, smarter programs. Protect America's critical infrastructure. Or help uncover what our adversaries are planning to do next. Learn more about careers at the National Security Agency today. Visit intelligencecareers.gov/NSA. That's intelligencecareers.gov/NSA. Xiaomi has put in 2 major device launches this week, both flagship Android phones in their own right. One's for tech progressives and the other for the most intense gamer. It seems like the company is cementing its place as a warrior the Chinese market can't ignore as it caps off a year of growth. and the stock offering too. Don't forget about that. Joining us to discuss all things made of millet, because apparently that's how you translate that out, Xiaomi, is Mobile Geek's own Nicole Scott, who took time out of her darn Friday night to talk to me about this in Taipei. What are you doing here, Nicole? You should be out drinking a little bit and, living it up. And
I'm not going to lie, there might be some Japanese whiskey during this podcast because it's been a good Friday night so far. And this is a pretty great way to kind of spend my 12:30 a.m. This is a great way on a Friday night, to be honest.
Well, I'm glad that you're able to do that to you. I just had a little instant coffee a little earlier, and it was all right. It was decent. So, but we'll forget about that because who needs caffeine?
Nothing
anyway?
like a good Hibiki 12. So.
All right, I'll take that. I'll take note of that. And in the meantime, we shall talk about all things Xiaomi. Let's start off with the Mi Mix 3. That was just announced yesterday, the 25th, at all places, the Forbidden City. Because if you want to be the best and the biggest, you have to go there and you have to show things off. And there's a special Forbidden Palace edition of the Mi Mix 3, which is. Historically, the Mix has been this bezel-less leader. It was the first one, the first phone that drove down those bezels or made an attempt to. And then since then, it's just been, the bandwagon that goes along with it. And now it's sort of doing its own thing, kinda. Not really also, because it's kind of fighting with Oppo. So there's that magnetic slider that they're doing to hide the cameras, and there are also a couple of other things like 10 gigabytes of RAM. 5G, we haven't really heard much about. They made a big point about promoting that in the run-up to this, but we don't have the networks just yet. Other than that, it's just a continuation of, pushing those edges just slightly closer to non-existence. So, I mean, what's your general take, first of all, on this?
The Mi Mix 2, I absolutely loved. I mean, it may have been the slipperiest phone in the existence of phones, but it was beautiful and something that probably shouldn't have been released to the market only because it's so difficult to make. So the fact that they went super limited production but actually bothered to release it instead of just saying like, hey, this is a showcase phone. Like already that was hats off to the Mi Mix line with the 2. But with the 3, I feel like this one, they could actually go wide. I mean, that kind of slider for the camera, because Oppo did it, it doesn't necessarily mean that it's like not unique. It's just, I think Xiaomi's not ready to go to like full production with that and kind of go wide. So I think this will be the first Mi Mix that maybe more people can get than just those who are lucky in China.
It's kind of an inflection point in some way because the industry has already gone full production, mass production on their own kind of, I mean, we talk about the notch as much as we want, as well as like the chin and everything else, but like that is the form factor that really allows for those bezels to be reduced as much as they are already, even compared to 2017, like that's it's a very stark difference. I'm wondering in terms of just being able to carry on that theme of wider availability, like where does it really compare? Because Oppo released its Find X. It's kind of a high-end, super powerful, motorized thing with the slider, and this is just magnets, so you can just, slide it in and out. Where do you think this will land in terms of the psyche of the Chinese consumer?
So when you look at the Find and you look at the Mi Mix, I personally feel a little more secure in grabbing the Xiaomi only because I'm a woman who destroys handsets. Like I crack every fourth pretty much that I get, even though I'm careful, or I really try to be. But this motorized component that goes up and down, I just think to myself, I'm going to break that. For sure, I'm gonna have a drop that I'm gonna break that. At least if it's like a physical slider that you're like tick, 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 tick. And it's good for 300,000, which to me seems low. Like if you look at everybody who's made a video, they're all like tick, 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 look at this, right? And it's like they're all showing off with the flicking. So I think that their phone would have gone through at least 100,000 before they left Beijing.
just showing that off, and
Just showing it off.
hey, I can do this better than you can.
Listen to that. Listen to that. You can just see it. Like, we make videos, so we know how many outtakes there are on that clicking.
Oh boy.
Oh boy. Right. So for me, 300,000 seems like maybe that's maybe a conservative number. They say a few years, but I don't know. I take a lot of selfies, and I think a lot of people take a lot of selfies. But I think that the magnetic mechanism seems like a more durable, more realistic kind of iteration of that kind of bezel-less enablement. Like more so than like a I don't know. That's me.
I mean, that's totally fair. I mean, it's not like you're paying $1,200 for this. You're paying the thing is 3,300 ish in Chinese yuan, so that's roughly 500-600. And this goes within Xiaomi's ethos of not. I believe it was their Indian division that talked about this. It was like, okay, we're never going to release a $700 phone unless the technology is there for it. If we can pioneer on this without compromising, and I'm wondering if this is does it how strongly the Mi Mix 3 is able to keep up on that, because there is a little bit of creep in there. Like, it's not 2,500. It's 30. It's in the 3,000s.
I think that people are less and less willing to drop $1,000 on a phone, especially when you need to add like the higher specifications. It's even more. I think that we've kind of reached our limit, even though everyone says, oh yeah, we can definitely, that market is still growing. But when people ask me for advice, most of the people that talk to me are like 500, 700. The few that are willing to spend 1,000 are only those that are like very device specific, like say like the Note 9, or they just can't leave Apple, right? Like those are the only two. So in my heart of hearts, I feel like we've probably maybe seen the limit of that $1,000. So the $500 to $700 range is where we're going to be seeing a lot more people. So I think it's still fine. And honestly, the hardware's evolved to a point where the difference between $500 and $7, like $500 and $1,000, is so small, right? It's so small that you need to just love new features and love like getting a new phone. Like, you have the habit and you can't get rid of it. I'm just not sure that the average person now will want to extend like longer. Like, we're seeing upgrade happen every 2 years now instead of like 14 months. So I don't know. I think there's definitely a place for like not at the absolute best, but pretty close, but not $1,000.
I mean, when you're pegging a lot of services, I mean, Xiaomi makes it, the bulk of its revenue in services. But when you're paying a lot of services at, these cute price points of $9.99 or $100 for the service plan for the cellular connection, it's just, it doesn't really make sense to be able to justify that difference if all things considered, everything is the same. So, I mean, that's a fair point to make. I do want to move on to their newest subsidiary, Black Shark, and earlier this week, they just launched the Black Shark Hilo, which is the second phone that they've launched this year, just in total. But both this year and in total, it's just amazing how, first of all, the gaming niche continues to consume the attention of a lot of more youth-focused, I would say, brands. And there's just something that reeks of outdoing Razer. Like, okay, so Razer Phone 2. There's this RGB chroma. It's for the Tri-Snake logo. And then, oh no, they're just going to apply it to the shark logo, and then we have these spoilers, and they're going to be gradiated so you can flow patterns on it. It's going to be great. And there's a whole bunch of other stuff too that we could totally get into, but I just wanted to get your sense of how, especially in the Chinese market where where gaming is just life almost, how you think this compares, or what your perspective is.
So there's an interesting statistic, and sorry for there's a little bit of whiskey involved tonight.
No, I have to see the whiskey. I need a little whiskey.
You
Yes.
need a little whiskey. So there's an interesting statistic about China that I love to ponder every once in a while. And it's that coming up to 2020, there's going to be over 300 million single men in China because of the one-child policy. And they've, made changes to correct this, but
it's still a cultural kind of bear.
But we're also just going to see this population mass come up that they can't do anything about now, right? I mean, they can open up their borders, which they have done a little bit to deal with it, but esports and gaming is the primary way that I see the Chinese government controlling this massive amount of single men who are turning 18. Esports and gaming. So we can definitely see the need for a gaming phone in a market that's emerging for predominantly young men who may be a little uncomfortable around women. To put it politely.
All you gotta do is get all the women to get into the stadium too, and then everything, I guess, Xi Jinping might consider that harmonious or something.
There's many women. This is the difference, right? Kind of there's a few less than normal. So, like having this, like nicely controlled digital kind of haven of online gaming that they can create specific events around and have an online community that's like really male focused. I think it's perfect for this type of on-the-go device because the market's emerged to a point where smartphones are now purpose-driven. It's no longer like which is the best phone. It's like which is the best phone for you. Like which phone is the one that actually speaks to your needs. And I think we're so lucky to be at this point now that we can stop focusing on minute technical innovation like bezel size and focus on the real point of the smartphone. What can it do to enrich my life? And when you're conscious enough of who you are to be able to define what you need, that's a second question altogether that I tend to like therapy people through when they ask me for smartphone advice now. So once you kind of get past that, then you can kind of say, okay, this is the right phone for me. And I think it's great that we're finally there and not just like, okay, if you want good, battery life or all day or camera. I mean, everything's now kind of good enough where you can honestly start to ask that question, like, what do I need for a smartphone? And for the China market, there's a massive need for a gaming phone.
Yeah, and I think a good example of what you just pointed out there is, I mean, it's more than just about the specs. It's more than just about having 10 gigs of RAM on it. It's about being able to utilize some of the biggest buzzwords like AI. If you're able to, this phone is being touted with a feature that allows it to record like a big moment. It's able to detect like, oh, you're going in for a major kill. It's able to record 10 seconds around that moment, and then you can choose to share it on Weibo or wherever that you would like to share it on. Like it's anticipating those needs, and I feel like that is going to be something that is going to put the Hilo or whatever else a step above another. So, I mean, I think you have it right on the mark in terms of that. So, do you have anything, I guess, in terms of as a reflection of perhaps just what Xiaomi is able to do with this category?
So, Xiaomi has still so much potential, and I think as a company, a really solid vision. They just have had such a strong ability to create ecosystems inside of China, and people have criticized it, but at the same time, like one of the reasons why I live in Taipei and why I'm so interested in going to Shenzhen is just seeing all of this, like, hey, we're making it, we're doing it. I mean, oh wait, we should figure out what people think about it. Oh, right, okay, cool, right? There's this like huge just passion to do. And they've been able to harness that through their stores because they just don't sell their own devices. They sell a whole bunch of other stuff. And it's kind of allowed this really interesting array of products to the Chinese consumer in a like much more entertaining way than we view retail. So for me, Xiaomi as a company, their smartphone division is just like one small part of like an overall plan for how people live. Yeah, So I'm still super on board with Xiaomi.
Well, I mean, totally, and especially that drive that they have. I mean, talk about this year. They opened up the first 24-hour Mija store in Russia, of all places, because that's a major market that they kind of have synergies is not really the word for it, but sympathies or empathies or something like that.
Yeah, there's like the Russian market is just huge and open, and it's physically so close to China as well. There's a lot
Yeah.
going for it there, just with their physical closeness, that
And I
massive border.
believe,
Like they're sort of eking into London somehow, and all the rest of Europe and Eurasia, and then there's also the fact that they're really just a manufacturer. At least, they're not Huawei in the sense that they're under investigation for so many of these telecom, spying kind of accusations, scandals.
Scandals,
and
yeah.
So they're kind of in a unique role. They're in a unique position here to be able to be a Chinese company, but not have a specter over them. So where do you think this goes on as, after the IPO, after everything else, where do you think this goes in terms of 2019 and perhaps beyond?
In all honesty, I think Xiaomi has stronger brand recognition, but Oppo has a slightly better position for like a more accepted government release. Like Xiaomi still has a lot of controversy around patent infringement. And that's been one of the highly talked about things over the past few years about why they haven't entered into Europe. And I don't know how much all of that will actually come into play because everybody seems to be descending on London as like that, ha ha ha,
Brexit. Hey, it's amazing.
Brexit. Maybe this is going to play in favor of my corporate otherness.
Gotta get in on those low taxes, right?
Yeah, and just there's definitely this really everybody's moving in into London. I mean, even Huawei's headquarters have moved from Germany into London. Oppo is setting up, or OnePlus is setting up there. There's just there seems to be this huge outflux from Europe that I'm not fully up to date on, but at the same time, I think it's interesting that Xiaomi's making a play at the same time as all these other manufacturers, and I think they'll be able to pull something off because of the shop that I talked about earlier, and a lot of these partners have actually figured out how to distribute into Europe. So I think that they have a strong network that they could leverage off of because of the ecosystem they've built in China.
Well, I mean, last I looked into their public offering, I don't think there were any Chinese banks floating it. So that could ease some suspicions, at least from the foreign end. And then there's also, the rumors, the ginning up of talking about, hey, Xiaomi is going to be in the United States sometime late this year or early next year. And everyone's, this has been one of the hotter companies that we've been looking forward to. If there was any Chinese entity to enter into the U.S. We've seen Huawei come in and blow up, and then now it's perhaps Xiaomi's turn to perhaps maybe right that ship or whatever the fates might have in store for them. So yeah, we'll see. I do want to throw you a curveball here and talk about just a little bit about the HTC Exodus 1, which, blockchain phone. We're going to talk about that for just a little bit. As far as I know, this is really just HTC U12 Plus, but with a more emphasis on crypto. That's pretty much it. You can only buy it with cryptocurrency. 0.15 Bitcoin, which if I do the quick conversion on Google, it tells me that it's $960. So I guess that's to be expected. I'm not sure if it's fair, but it's to be expected. And for the most part, it's just a lot of the same specifications, but you have more wallets, you have more access to the nodes and whatnot. And there wasn't really too much talk about this original vision, of the idea of how this is a whole new entire blockchain network because each phone will be a node and whatnot. So, thoughts on this just for a quick second?
So very interestingly, I'm based in Taiwan. HTC is a Taiwanese company. Here's some backstory that I think will frame this phone perfectly. Taiwan isn't a country, right? China says you recognize China or you recognize Taiwan. Taiwan's technically not a country. One of my biggest banes of existence here is international banking, because the banks don't actually have the same guarantees because it's not an actual country. Right. So the International Banking Association, doesn't, it's just not as easy
politically,
correct. And so the banks have had international challenges for as long as Taiwan has existed. And 2 years ago now, the founder of Ethereum actually released Ethereum 2 here. No, last year. I think it was last year. Released Ethereum 2 at a conference here because Taiwan is looking to become a major crypto hub, like to actually set up government. Like everyone talks about Singapore and all these other places as being really progressive, but Taiwan is literally looking to how to secure its money against a Chinese invasion. Let's just be real. This is something politically that with the Trump government has become a lot more present in like the country's thoughts. And HTC, as a Taiwanese company who's 100% there for all of Taiwan's needs and is wonderful in that aspect, I think that this is a reaction to what's happening here in Taiwan politically. So to come out with a phone that really embraces crypto as like a base concept, right, for like a society and an ecosystem and like all of these things that would be more secure than potentially what Taiwan has right now. I'm not saying that this is what their vision is of it, but I'm saying that I think that this is a result of the political situation here in the country.
Yeah, especially after the election and inauguration of President Tsai Ing-wen of the Democratic Progressive Party. She has been kind of, treading water more with Beijing, and it's just been, it's a little on edge. So it's kind of both a happenstance that the blockchain technology is developing at the same time that these tensions grow tighter. So yeah, definitely.
I think you were being very polite when you said treading water. She was actually the Taiwanese ambassador to China, so she was in Beijing for many years, and she was known as a hard ass beep in order to deal with. Like she doesn't, she doesn't totally back down. And her stance is not that Taiwan will rejoin China, which is very interesting during this kind of time when the U.S. has backed Taiwan and now it's a total pawn.
Well, now it's not just a diplomatic relationship. She's now the figurehead of this so-called renegade province. So it's going to be especially interesting how the next few years will navigate. So definitely a key factor in seeing HTC come out with this. Even
that may have not been the tech angle you were looking for, but that was the angle that most I wanted to share.
Oh yeah, totally. I mean, even in spite of HTC's kind of financially treading water, it's kind of still trying its best to gather something up and then perhaps look into the future a little bit. So, I mean, my brother is still considering an HTC U12 for purchase. I hope that
they're great phones, though.
Oh yeah, it's great hardware. The software, as last I heard, was still decent, if not just a little bit long in the tooth. But it's just the fact that how much can I guarantee him that is this really a good investment? Are you going to get good service from a company that is this deep in their mud? So, yeah,
like my phone's haptic feedback or like the squeeze functions. I didn't have any problems with mine, but I held my review until everyone got their updates, and I felt like it was a more even footing ground because I thought my phone worked really good, but it still made me hesitant to recommend it when so many people were having issues with it. And it's such a cool feature. And when it misfires, it's like you want to throw your phone against the ground. So it's definitely one of those things where you're like, I love it, but do I want to like hate it? Because you would hate
Yeah.
it when it goes wrong.
Trust me, a $1,000 phone is not something to play hot tomato with. So,
Yeah, agreed, agreed.
yeah. Well, on that note, I think we should let you enjoy your Friday night a little bit more.
All
So,
right.
Nicole Scott, Mobile Geeks, we love you. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
The Pocketnow Weekly is also supported by OnePlus. The OnePlus 6T launches in just a few days. Tickets to the event sold out quickly, but you can watch it live on October 29 at 11 a.m. Eastern from wherever you are. Just go to pocketnow.com/OnePlus6T for more info.
Oh hi, my name's Albert. I'm 20, and a year and a half ago I launched a Kickstarter campaign for MAKERphone, an educational gaming device. Thanks to your amazing help, we produced thousands of MAKERphones and turned our passion and hobbies into something more. After collecting feedback from hundreds of MAKERphone supporters, we've come up with something completely new. Meet MAKERphone!
We are talking with one of the main people behind what is called the MAKERphone, a project that is up on Kickstarter right now that has grossed over $185,000 above the
that much already?
Yeah, it's up there. I have the
Yeah, we're good. Yeah. So yeah, my name is Albert Gajszak. Yeah, so I'm the creator of MAKERphone, and actually I'm the co-founder of the startup behind MAKERphone. The startup is called Circuit Mess, and the name it actually comes from two words: circuit, because that's what we do. We make circuits, and mess because our company is in a mess. So we figured out it's a great name for our startup. So yeah, I'm actually 20, and founded my company when I was in high school. So on fourth grade of high school, I started the Kickstarter campaign for MAKERphone, and that was our first project. So MAKERphone basically is a do-it-yourself gaming device, and the first crowdfunding campaign it raised over $100,000. We fulfilled all of MAKERphones, continued selling them, and started working on a new project that we have currently launched 12 days ago. And yeah, we're already over $185,000. So yeah, it's actually selling pretty well. So yeah.
Yeah. Well, first of
By
all,
the way,
congratulations on that. Oh, sorry, go for it.
yeah, thank you. So yeah, I just wanted to mention that besides me and this little startup, there's also seven people working on it, and it all started a year and a half ago. And currently, we're a small team based here in Croatia. Croatia it's a small country in Europe. It was on World Cup this year in the finals, so you probably heard about it now. Yeah, before that nobody knew where it was. So yeah.
Well, I mean, you just mentioned a little while ago that you're 20. First of all, so I'm already feeling a little bit older. But the question that I have is like, so coming from this younger generation, like what inspired you to take a look at what could be considered sort of a throwback? We'll get into the product. We'll get into the product in a little bit, but obviously, I have like a Google Pixel 3 right here on the table, and we have all of these really advanced smartphones. What was the impetus of this particular MAKERphone product?
Yeah, so that's a tough question. So actually, MakerPhone, our main goal was not to make something retro. I mean, retro it certainly is becoming increasingly popular with stuff like NES Mini, or I don't
Oh
know,
yeah.
PlayStation Mini and stuff like that. So retro it's all over the place right now. But actually, when I started with MakerBuino, I made the first prototype 6 years ago, and actually it was inspired by this whole maker movement. So I was born in '98, so I'm actually the PlayStation 2 generation. So I
Oh
was
man.
playing PlayStation 2, and yeah, I wasn't playing pixel art games and stuff like that when I was young. I mean, pixel art. They weren't called pixel art games back then. They were just called games.
Yeah,
So yeah,
exactly.
I actually do not recall Pokemon or stuff like that being
Yeah.
played. But what actually inspired this whole project was this maker movement, and in the couple of in a few past years, it became increasingly popular, just like retro became popular. Maker movement, people building stuff in their homes, buying 3D printers, printing, I don't know, stuff, and playing with Arduinos. And I jumped on that whole maker craze when I was 11 or so, and I figured out that it's number one, it's really fun. I really liked building stuff, and I still love building stuff, and that's why I started this whole business. And the second reason why we actually started with Maker Arena and MakerPhone was that we saw a huge potential in this market. So currently, education, STEM, makers, stuff like that, it's becoming increasingly popular, and this whole educational and maker market, it's growing. And because of that, we saw that a product like this really can make some kind of an impact on the market. So that was actually the primary motivation. And the whole retro aspect of the device, it actually it came like some kind of side effect, because if you want to make a phone that a person can assemble by its own hands, you cannot make it super complex. It cannot run the latest version of Android. It needs to be retro. It needs to have a processor that runs pixel artsy, sprites, and has 128 by 160 pixels, because first of all, we didn't want to make it super expensive. We wanted to make a device that's going to educate people, not compete with modern flagships. And second of all, we wanted to make it simple. So yeah, retro, it actually came as a side effect, but it's also a selling point of our product now, because people are actually remembering Space Invaders and stuff like that. They were coding on, I don't know, ZX Spectrums and stuff like that.
Oh
So yeah,
yeah, definitely.
I guess
So
that's the answer.
Oh yeah, definitely, and I think the retro aspect does really well to sort of it's sort of like self marketing in a way, because a lot of people might look at this kind of device and think, wow, that's a bit of a throwback, and I really like that. As you said, retro is really in right now, but at the same time, like you said, you didn't want to make a device that was too complicated, so there are a couple of different tiers on this, and I would implore everybody to check out the Kickstarter page, really get to know this product, because it's it's honestly really really cool, and it is really affordable. I mean, I'm looking at this now, and a fully assembled one is an option. So you can just get straight into the device. But if you want to actually make it, there's that educational aspect to this. What comes with that particular kit? And how much experience would someone have to have with, let's say, soldering? Because I saw that picture, and I'm intimidated by something like that just from the outset.
Okay, yeah. So what comes in the kit is actually, we have several kit versions. As you said, we have a standard kit, in which you get a box with all the components that the phone needs in order to work. We also have an assembled version, because we understand that some people are intimidated by the assembly process and are not really keen to soldering. So we offer that as a version 2, because they only want to code. And the third version is the tools pack, where you also get all the tools that you need for the assembly, as well as the kit. So in the basic kit, yeah, you get the components and you need to assemble it. And the skill level that actually the age limit that we recommend is 11 plus. So this device, certainly you could assemble it. I guess that you're 11 plus, and uh, so yeah, that's basically that's the age limit. The skill level, we say and claim that if you have no skill whatever in this field of electronics and programming and soldering, we can teach you using our internet tutorials. So everything that you need to have is the tools and some enthusiasm and interest in technology. and we're going to teach you everything else. So it may look complex, but actually this kit, this mobile phone, you do not assemble all the parts on it. So on the front page, on the front side of the mobile phone, you have these big modules. For example, I don't know if you're looking at our listing right now, but for example, we have this diagram with 9 parts. So there's like 9 basic parts. This big red PCB, the circuit board, you have a screen module, an amplifier module, you have the sound player module, the main microprocessor and stuff like that. The big parts like push buttons. So you only need to solder and assemble the big parts. And you also have some tiny components on the back side of the PCB of the circuit board, which come already pre-soldered. So the reason behind this is some of those components that are on the back, you really cannot buy them in a package big enough for an average person to solder it on the back. And also, if we made the phone fully DIY, so if you were assembling every single component of the phone, it would probably be as big as a table. So that's the reason why we yeah, so it would be pretty clunky, and it's already pretty clunky, so I think it will be too clunky. So that's the reason why anyone can assemble it, because basically you're assembling the phone, but you're not really assembling all the tiny components. You're just, putting the basics on it and soldering. But through this process of assembling your phone, we're trying to teach you all the basics, for example, soldering, and explain you how an actual phone works. For example, our guide, it's not like IKEA's build guide where they show you where you put the screws and that's it. We're trying to educate people, just like with MakerBuino, and tell them, okay, this is the microcomputer. It's used for this and that. So this is a resistor. You put it here because of this. So yeah, that's the whole point of the device.
Yeah, and I'm sure people will be able to see in the Kickstarter page. But if anyone is thinking about it, this phone will be able to make. It has a GSM radio, even Wi-Fi, and even Bluetooth. That kind of surprised me as well. I thought that was really awesome. So there will be a lot of those functions right out of the box. But I guess where I want to go next here is obviously the hardware is a big focus of the MakerPhone. What can you say and share with our listeners and viewers about the software experience? Because clearly there's a learning experience behind that as well.
Okay, yeah, so software, yeah, actually, emphasis was on the hardware, but we're not just selling hardware. We're not just creating hardware. And what we're trying to make is this database of tutorials and educational material and content and software that is going to be used for the MakerPhone. We have something like that already developed for MakerBuino. We call it the Creations Gallery, and basically it's a gallery of video games that users have made. And on MakerBuino, we already allowed people to create their own games and share it in our creations gallery. And with MakerPhone, we are trying to step this up a little bit. And yeah, the whole point is that you can connect your MakerPhone to your PC just after you assemble it, and you can code it in 3 main languages: in Scratch, in Python, and in Arduino, which is basically C and C++. And what we're trying to do with this is we've segmented this learning process into levels. We actually have this showed on a graphic in our page. So we're trying to get people into coding with Scratch. And for those who do not know what Scratch is, it's the most basic programming language that is nowadays used in educational institutions worldwide. Basically, it's a window with blocks that you need to put together and form code. And it's really great because with just 2 blocks of code, you can make something. You can write "Hello World" on your phone, and you can actually see something happening. And the second level is Python, and it's an increasingly popular language. And actually, the creator of Python, he created the language in order to allow people that are not engineers and programmers to get into coding. So it's it doesn't have variable allocation and stuff like that. So it's pretty straightforward for someone to get into textual coding. And the final level is Arduino, which is basically C and C++, and it's actually a pretty a strong language. It's pretty powerful, and you can code actual software, for example, video games in Unity, and easily swap to C sharp after that level. So yeah, that's the whole point of MakerPhone. And what we're actually trying to do is wrap all this up in what we call the Circuit Mesh world. And Circuit Mesh world, it's actually a big hub for all these creations, tutorials, and software that we and users are creating for the MakerPhone. And we're also going to offer MakerBueno's tutorials there as well.
Oh, that's great. So coming from Maker Bueno to now this month's Maker Phone, there have been a lot of Arduino Kickstarter campaigns that have been successful. Obviously, yours is the most DIY of the bunch. Did you see any of those other crowdfunding campaigns? Like, what did you learn from all of those that you brought into this particular campaign, which is already wildly successful?
Yeah. So what you're actually asking is if I've seen other similar campaigns like
Yes.
Arduino campaigns, and so yeah, of course. I mean, we were. It's a bad term, but we were stalking other campaigns and other products, and uh, you know, business developers, they usually call it uh, marketing analysis. So we were doing a marketing analysis and looking at our Kickstarter, at other Kickstarter campaigns and similar products, and so far this is the first DIY phone in this form. There were some other DIY phones on the market, and people usually, uh, when we show this to an average consumer, they usually say, "Oh, this is like Google's Project Aura, and this is like phone blocks, and this it was already made." So I would like to point out that MakerPhone, it's not phone blocks reimagined. So phone blocks, it was trying to substitute your iPhone, your Samsung Galaxy. It was trying to compete with flagships. This is purely an educational device, and it's not going to replace your iPhone. And about Arduino and Maker projects, yeah, I agree that there's an increasing number of them appearing on the market and on Kickstarter, on Indiegogo, on similar campaigns. But I think that we're actually the first one to make a device in this form factor. And what I actually think about all these, and you cannot really generalize it, but most of those Arduino kits and boards and uh, development kits that appear on the market, I think that they are just boring because you have a ton of devices that are tiny robots on free wheels that you assemble, and when you show that to someone, it's just it's boring. And with this thing, we are trying to bring this whole maker idea and the DIY aspect to a broader audience. We're trying to appeal to a mainstream audience because a mobile phone, everybody knows what a mobile phone is. Everybody has one, and when you give them this kit, when you give this kit to a child, then the child, it's not learning how to solder because you tell the child it's good. The child is learning how to solder because it wants to make this super cool mobile phone which plays games, which runs apps, which does some MP3 files and stuff like that. So there is this end goal, and that's what we're trying to do. This. So basically, what we invented here is, okay, invented is a strong word. So basically, where we innovated here is this crossover of mainstream, so mobile phones, and DIY. So that's what we've connected, because this is yet another DIY kit, and there's a ton of that. And the only thing that how we differ from the competition is with this whole mainstream plus DIY kit crossover idea.
I love that. I love that you kind of give that idea of the incentive of learning how to do all of these things, because that's a real thing. Like, we're being told all the time these days that coding is really important. Everyone can learn to code. Everyone should learn to code. But then not a lot of people can answer the question, well, what am I going to do with it? So
that's correct. I mean,
yeah.
with Maker Bueno, we actually tried to make the same thing. We were doing test workshops before we actually decided to make a Kickstarter campaign, and kids they just love the idea of making their own consoles, because that way you didn't have to explain them. Coding is useful. A kid, it really doesn't care if coding is useful. It cares about this super cool game console that plays games. The same story as with MakerPhone.
Yeah, that's awesome. Okay, so what are the overarching goals for something like this? I don't want to go so far as to say, will MakerPhone bring you into a place where you can make like a Maker smartphone or something like that, because obviously that would overcomplicate things, and like you said, you don't want to do that. But what are the general goals for this particular product? You said educational. Is there going to be some sort of like consumer aspect to it that goes beyond the DIY aspect? Are you looking to create products in the future based upon all this?
Okay, so our big goal, the big picture, how we see it, we are a startup. We exist for a year and a half, and that's really not so much time. So stuff is changing so quickly that sometimes, we really do not know how the company is going to look like in 6 months. We really cannot predict in which way our growth is going to go. But how we see it currently, we really want to stay in this educational market and the DIY maker market for some time, because we see a huge potential. As I said earlier, I think that STEM education and educational toys and stuff like that, it's a huge growing market that's just expanding. And what we are trying to do is a series of DIY maker products that are going to bring technology, bring engineering, bring coding to the masses in a fun and interesting way. That's the story behind Maker Bueno. That's the story behind MakerPhone. We're actually trying to connect mainstream with DIY with our products, and we're trying to do it in different ways. Some short-term plans would be currently our kits, they're all 11 plus, because they include soldering, and soldering sometimes it intimidates people. It's not suitable for young children, and what we would really like to do is design kit versions of Maker Bueno and MakerPhone that are going to be less complex, that are going to be made of snap-on components that you put together and you do not need to solder. We actually want to make a series of products that are going to appeal to different age limits. So something for a bit younger children, something for a bit older children, and we are trying to make kits that are going to be in different price ranges. So, for example, we're going to make something a bit more expensive than MakerPhone, some premium products, and I think that we really want to make something that's going to be a bit cheaper. And the whole story behind this is we're building this brand, CircuitMess, our company name. We are going to shut down MakerBueno.com and forward it to CircuitMess.com, and we're going to unite all our products that we are currently working on under this name. So that's the big picture where we want to go, and we'll see. Maybe we'll be selling toothbrushes on Amazon. We'll see how that goes.
Oh, that'd be great. Yeah, I think that'd be awesome. And I can see a lot of general consumers finding things to love about this. I mean, just for all of our listeners and viewers, think of it this way. This is a phone that is under $200. It has a headphone jack and a dedicated DAC. So think about that.
Yeah, headphone jack. Yeah, headphone jack. That's a feature. Also, it has 8 notification lights. I don't know if you've seen. So
I was looking at that earlier. That's so cool.
Yeah, nowadays everyone's competing with number of cameras, and we're competing with a number of flashy lights. So this is the first phone with 8 notification lights.
I could see myself using this as that apparatus for education. I have no coding experience, very little, I should say, but I have even less electrical experience when it comes to actually building things like this. So I would love to be able to try this out. I could even see myself. I can even see us here at Pocketnow and with XDA doing something like who can build it the fastest. We could do that kind of thing. I think that'd be great.
Yeah, that would be cool.
Yeah, for sure. All right, awesome. Well, I really want to thank you for your time. To our viewers and listeners, make sure you check out the Kickstarter campaign. The link is, as always, will be in the show notes, and we'll also share it on our social media and everywhere. So I want to thank you again, Albert. Thank you so much for spending some time with us. I imagine it's pretty late over where you are right now, so thank you again.
It's almost 9 p.m., yeah.
Oh, not too bad.
Yeah, not too bad. I'm going to work now.
Yeah, definitely. All right, cool. So we'll connect again in the future. I would say good luck on the campaign, but it's already funded. I hope it gets even better for the next month.
Yeah, thanks.
Yeah. All right, cool. So back to the show for us.
Thanks, Josh. And you can learn more about MAKERphone and all of the stories you've heard today by going to this episode's description. You can also head to pocketnow.com/podcast to find the rundown. And on that note, that is it for now. The Weekly is just as much a conversation as it is a show, so make sure your voices are heard, either in the comment sections or by emailing us, podcast@pocketnow.com. On Twitter, Daniel is at ALTIMAX98. TK is at TKDSL8655. Nicole is at Nicole Scooter. Josh is at JVTechT, because he loves tech and he loves his tea. And I can be found at Point Jules. Pocketnow is at Pocketnow on Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, and YouTube in English and Espanol, where you can find more news on the Pocketnow Daily and Pocketnow a Diario every weekday. We'd certainly appreciate your feedback through Google, Apple, Stitcher, Pocket Cast, or wherever you happen to be streaming us, because without you, we wouldn't have been able to make this show for your eyes and ears for 329 weeks straight. Thanks for your company. It's been a pleasure. Let's meet again soon.